The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Chapter 11. 3 days later, the streets of Paris were crowded. Everyone rushed to the Cathedral of Notre Dame. They all wanted to watch poor Quasimodo get punished. All of Paris was talking about how the Hunchback had tried to kidnap Esmeralda. Many people came early. They wanted to see the Hunchback for themselves, and they wanted a good view of the whipping at noon. I was there too. I was working. I was acting like a clown for the crowd. The king of beggars had taught me this trade. Now I was Pierre the juggler. I balanced chairs on my head. I juggled 3 wooden balls at once. The people threw me coins. I was happy. At least now I was being paid for my work. Esmeralda was there too. She danced for the people. She did tricks with her goat, Jolly. Everyone loved Esmeralda and her talented pet. When the clock struck noon, the huge doors of the Palace of Justice opened. The bailiff came out. Behind him, guards were dragging Quasimodo, who was still in chains. For 3 long days he had waited in his jail. The archdeacon had never come for him. Quasimodo's head was bowed. His one good eye looked at everyone. The chains were heavy, and he walked slowly. One of the guards pushed him, and he fell to the ground. The guards dragged him up again. The guards led Quasimodo to a large wooden wheel in the center of the square. The wheel was turned on its side, and the men put Quasimodo on top of it. He kneeled as the guards put an iron collar on his neck. His arms were tied behind his back. When they were done, the bailiff stood beside Quasimodo and read from a parchment. "For the crime of stealing a woman," the old man said in a loud voice, "Quasimodo is to be whipped 25 times. The people gasped. 25 lashes? Quasimodo stared at the mob watching him, his head turning left and right. His red hair was wild. His mouth gaped. The people moved closer. Everyone was getting excited now. They wanted to watch the beating. Then a man in black clothes took the bailiff's place. He was wearing a black hood that covered his face. In his hand, he clutched a long leather whip. He snapped the whip. It cracked loudly. The people gasped again. One of the guards stepped back and tore the shirt off Quasimodo's back. Everyone was shocked to see the large hump that grew from his spine. Poor Quasimodo moaned in fear and shame, but no one could hear him above the noise of the crowd. Then the man with the black hood spit into both hands and grabbed the whip tightly. He swung the whip above his head and into the air. He cracked the whip once more and stood over the hunchback. "Begin the punishment," the bailiff ordered. The man in black brought the whip down. Crack! The leather whip flashed across Quasimodo's naked back. The hunchback groaned and thrashed. He tried to break free. The chains stopped him. "One," the old man yelled. The whip went back again. Then the man in black hit Quasimodo again. Crack! "2," shouted the old man. Crack! 3! The man in black raised his arms many times. Each time the whip struck him, Quasimodo moaned and jerked. Time and time again, the whip was raised and brought down. Each time the bailiff counted out loud. As the punishment proceeded, the people watching no longer seemed to enjoy it. The crowd slowly grew quiet. Only the sound of the whip and the counting of the bailiff could be heard. That and the terrible moans of Quasimodo. Crack! 15. Crack! 16. After that, Quasimodo stopped moaning. Again and again the whip bit into his flesh. At last there was a final snap of the whip. The bailiff shouted the number 25. The man in black stepped back. He gathered the whip into a loop and walked away. The crowd parted in fear and let him pass. The bailiff stood next to the wheel and spoke to the people. "For 1 hour, Quasimodo the bell ringer will remain here on public display." A guard handed the old man a sand-filled hourglass. The bailiff turned it, and the sands began to run to the bottom. When the sand runs out, the prisoner will be set free, the bailiff announced. Then he walked back through the doors to the Palace of Justice. Quasimodo stayed chained to the wheel. One of the guards threw a bucket of water on his back to wash away the blood. Then 2 other guards got on either side of the wheel. They began to slowly turn the mighty wheel around and around. As the wheel turned, everyone could see the terrible wounds on Quasimodo's humped back, but no one cheered. Many people felt sorry for the bell ringer. Some believed he really had tried to steal a woman. Others thought him innocent. The superstitious believed that because he looked so horrible, Quasimodo must be bad. Many arguments broke out among the people. "Free him," some people shouted. "He is a monster. Let him be punished," others cried. Quasimodo did not hear them. He just hung his head and turned around and around. More blood seeped from his wounds. Another guard got a bucket of water and threw it on the hunchback. The second bucket seemed to wake Quasimodo up. He glared at the guard with his one good eye. His lips peeled back in a sneer. Then he stared out at the crowd. Everyone was startled when Quasimodo lifted his head and shouted, "Water!" he cried. "Water!" "The monster is thirsty," one of the guards said. The other guards laughed at Quasimodo's suffering. "Water!" Quasimodo begged again. The guards just kept laughing. Some of the people watching began to laugh too. Suddenly, everyone stopped laughing. A woman with long dark hair had stepped out from the crowd. It was Esmeralda, with Jolly by her side. Her long gypsy dress blew in the wind. Her dark hair flowed down over her shoulders. Esmeralda went to the fountain and silently filled a pitcher with cold water. As everyone watched, she walked to the wheel. "Stay back," a guard ordered her. Esmeralda ignored him. She took the pitcher up to the hunchback and put it to his lips. Quasimodo stared at the gypsy girl with his single eye. Then he tasted the cool water. He drank, gulping loudly. Some of the water ran down his chin, but he swallowed most of it. When he was done, he looked down at the girl. He tried to thank her, but the words would not come. Esmeralda looked into the hunchback's eye and understood. She smiled and reached out and touched his face. Ashamed of his ugliness, the hunchback began to weep. He kissed Esmeralda's hand as tears ran down his cheeks. No one had ever been kind to Quasimodo before. Because he was ugly and could not hear, people hated and feared him. Now this woman was treating him kindly. Quasimodo's heart was touched by her compassion. Again he tried to speak. But another voice spoke up loudly. Everyone turned to see Claude Frollo, the archdeacon. He was standing with a group of soldiers in armor. The soldiers were led by Phoebus. The crowd drew back in fear of the cruel archdeacon. "There is the witch," he shouted, pointing at Esmeralda. "Arrest her." Suddenly the soldiers ran at Esmeralda. In fear, she dropped the pitcher and tried to run, but the men in armor were faster. The soldiers grabbed her, and Jolly too. She screamed and struggled as they led her away. Jolly bleated in fear as he and his mistress were dragged to the Palace of Justice. "Esmeralda!" I shouted. Quasimodo too shouted and tried to break his chains. The soldiers were hurting Esmeralda, but it was hopeless. The chains holding the hunchback were too strong. Esmeralda screamed once as the soldiers took her away. Then the doors of the Palace of Justice closed behind her. I tried to rush forward, tried to save my beautiful Esmeralda, but one of the soldiers knocked me down with a club. My head hit the stone street, and I knew no more.